everyone, welcome to my craft room. I'm Leo from inkymemories.co.uk. I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in South Wales. And today on this workshop Wednesday, I'm going to be making a birthday card for my mum. And we're going to be using this beautiful set here, so the Peaceful Moments stamp set and the Poppy Moments dies. Now these are actually from our annual catalogue, so the current catalogue that we are working from at the moment. And this can be found on page 19 in the catalogue here. And as you can see, this stamp set is full of sentiments, and the dies actually cut out these gorgeous poppy flowers and leaves and sort of various embellishments to go with them. And we're going to be using a number of the in colours again. So this is the 2020 to 2022 in colours that are recently released with this annual catalogue. I'm still really in love with these colours. I think they all work beautifully together. And like I said, this is a birthday card for my mum. I always like to make her something a little bit special when her birthday comes around. And today, since we are working on a workshop Wednesday today, we will be going through all of the processes step by step, including cutting all of the cardstock. So the first thing that I'm actually going to do today is to cut the card base that we need. So I'm going to bring in my trimmer here. And for this I have, for the card base, I'm going to be using Misty Moonlight. And this is just a sheet of A4. And in order to make a card base, what we're going to do first of all is cut the sheet in half. So half of a sheet of A4 is actually 14.85 centimetres. So all I do is get to 14.8 and just notch it over the line ever so slightly. Pop the guide in place, make sure your cardstock is butted up right up to this edge up here. And once you're ready, just pull your trimmer blade through. And that's your card base cut. I'm just going to rotate it then, and I'm going to score straight down the middle. So this will be at 10.5 because the sheet of A4 is 21 centimetres wide. So again, I'm popping the guide in place. I'm going to take the scoring slide this time. So the dark grey piece is the cutter. This is the scoring tool. I'm just going to run this over the cardstock a couple of times. And as you can see, that has made our score line down the middle of our cardstock in order for us to make our card base. So I'm going to pop that to one side. There's a couple of other pieces that I need to cut for this. So I'm also going to be using some of the 2020-2022 designer series paper in the in colour colours. So I'm going to be using a piece of the Magenta Madness paper. And the one that I want for this is this piece that has this sort of Hessian type texture on the back of it. I'm going to use this as a mat for the card. So the size that I want this to be is just ever so slightly smaller than our card base. We're going to cut it at 14.35 centimetres, so just 5 centimetres smaller than the card base itself. So again, I'm going to take it to 14.3 over here on my trimmer and then just knock it over the edge. Pop the guide down and cut. And I'll rotate that, and I want this to be at 10 centimetres. So half a centimetre in, like so. And that is our first mat. I also then want another mat in Misty Moonlight, so I'm going to bring this piece back in. And this one is going to be at 13.35 centimetres, so I'm bringing this one in by a full centimetre this time. So again, on here I'm just bringing this up to 13.3 and then knocking it over the edge, making sure it's butted up across the top and cut. And then I want this to be 9 centimetres wide. And there is our second mat for the front of the card. The next thing that I'm going to need then is actually a piece of Whisper White cardstock to go inside the card, because we are using a darker base. I always like to put a white piece of card inside to be able to write on. I'm going to do that at the same size, so 13.35 by 9. And that's our inner mat for the card. The last thing I'm going to cut then is a couple of pieces for our sentiment. So I'm going to bring in a piece of Magenta Madness cardstock. And this one I want to cut at 2.5 centimeters. And I often find when I'm cutting smaller sizes that it's easier to use this side of the trimmer than this side. So 2.5 centimeters is just on here. And again, I'm just going to line that up with the 2.5 centimeter mark, pop the guide in place, and then using the cutting blade, just pull that straight through. And I'm going to leave it long just so we can trim it in the punch to the length that we need it to be. And I'm going to do the same with a piece of Whisper White. So again, I want this to be 2.5 centimeters. So I'm just going to pull this right the way over to 2.5 centimeters on here. And there is our Whisper White piece for our sentiment. And that's all of the trimming that I need to do with our trimmer. So I'm just going to pop this out of the way. On the front of the card, we're going to be using the Poppy Moments dies for this. And there's quite a few dies that we're going to be using from this set. So as you can see, there are a number of different parts to this. So for each of the flowers, you have the sort of inner part. This gives you the detail that sticks over the top. And then you also have an outer piece that cuts the background piece of cardstock. And as you can see, they do line up so that when you stick them together, they create one flower for you. And we're going to be using both of those for the large poppy and also for the smaller one as well. So here is the inner and outer pieces for those. I'm going to be cutting a couple of leaves, and these also have 2 dies to them. So you have the outer piece, this cuts the sort of background piece, and then this cuts the top piece that layers over the top. I'm going to be doing both of those, and also a couple of these leaves as well. And these work in the same way. So this is the background piece, and this is the sort of foreground piece for those dies. I'm going to need a couple of centres for our flowers, and I'm going to be using these small leaf and bud pieces as well. So I'm just going to pull all of these out, pop that to one side. So in order to make gluing these pieces easier, I'm actually going to be using our multi-purpose adhesive sheets today. Now, this is basically a large piece of adhesive between 2 pieces of backing paper. The way that you use this is you stick your cardstock to one side, run it through your die cutting machine, and then you peel off the backing on the other side, and the die cut then is pre-glued underneath, ready to stick together. I'm just going to use this for a couple of pieces, namely the top 2 pieces of the flowers and the top 2 pieces of the leaves, in order to make assembling everything at the end a little bit easier. So I'm actually pre-cut some of these pieces ready to go. So in Magenta Madness, I have a piece for these 2. And then I have 2 pieces in Just Jade, one for the top detail part of the bigger leaves, and then one for 2 of the top detail part of the single leaves. And like I said, the way this works is you peel off first of all the backing paper, like so. And this part then is tacky and covered in adhesive, so you then just stick your cardstock onto the tacky side. Just like so. And then you can see I have backing paper on the back, so this is where the adhesive is going to be. So once I've done my die cutting, the adhesive on here will be what we then use to stick the pieces down. So I'm just going to pop these other two pieces into their paper as well. Just like that. And any pieces of adhesive that are hanging over, I'm actually just going to snip off so they don't get too sticky in my Big Shot. And for this I don't use my good paper snips, I just use an older pair of scissors. I don't want to gum up my good scissors with adhesive. And the same one here, so I'm just going to snip up this edge. As you can see, the adhesive is sticking to my scissors already, so this is why I don't want to use good scissors for this. I would always recommend in your craft room that you keep a pair of good scissors, especially for cutting things like ribbon. You want a nice sharp pair of scissors for that, so you get nice clean cuts on your ribbon. And then keep a pair that you are happy to use for cutting anything that has glue on it, so you're not gumming up your good scissors. Okay, now that I have all of my pieces onto the adhesive backing, I'm going to start running everything through the Big Shot, the die cutting machine, so I can start getting all of these pieces cut out. So I'm just going to bring that in and remove a couple of these bits out of the way. With the die cutting machine, I'm still using our Big Shot at the moment. Our new die cutting machines are coming very soon. With the launch of the next catalogue, we are then hoping to have custom orders available for the new die cutting machines shortly, and as soon as that happens I will obviously post everywhere, so you can grab one if you want one. I'm going to start first of all then die cutting the bases for our flowers, and I'm going to be doing this in Rococo Rose. Now this is one of our in colours from last year, so 2019 to 2021 in colours. I'm going to be cutting both of the backgrounds for the poppies in this colour. So there's the larger one and the smaller one. And I'm also going to be adding on some of the flower buds in this colour as well. So that's just this small oval die here. And I'm going to be cutting 3 of those in total. So I'm just going to pop it on here. And because I have the magnetic base plate underneath my cutting plate for this, these are all nicely held in place by the magnet, so I can line up more than one die for each pass through. It just helps to make everything a little bit quicker, but the magnet holds it in place. There's no chance of the thing sort of shimmying together or going over each other as they're going through the Big Shot. I'm going to pop my top cutting plate in, feed it into the machine and then roll it through. It does click and crunch as it goes through, that's how you know it's done a good die cut. Okay, peel these away. So we've finished with those. So there's the background of our large poppy. And the smaller one. And sometimes I do find that because my plates are a little bit scarred, as you can see, my die cuts do sometimes stick into the plate, so I'm just using a poking tool just to pry this up off the plate. You can also flex the plate slightly to do it. I have been meaning to buy new plates, but knowing that we have a new cutting machine coming very soon, I have been holding off, waiting for the new machine instead. So I'm very much looking forward to getting that in my craft room. Okay, and now that I've got that off, I'm just going to use the 2 holes in the die just to poke through the piece of cardstock and loosen it out of the die itself, like so. I need to cut 2 more of this part. That's our 3 buds and the 2 backgrounds for our poppies cut. So the next thing I'm going to die cut is actually the front part of the poppies, the sort of detailed part. And for this I'm going to be using the piece in Magenta Madness that I have put the adhesive onto the back of. So we're going to be using these 2 dies, the detailed parts, and again I'm just going to pop them down onto my cardstock. Because the magnet is there, it is going to be holding these in place so they won't move around too much as they're going through. Rebuild my sandwich and I'll run this through again. And there is our pieces all nicely cut out. And with these I'm just going to poke the big parts out just to get them out of the way. You can just do that with a finger or a thumb. They just push out nice and easily, like so. There we go. And then you can see I've got the backing paper on here and with the adhesive then underneath. I shall save that to one side and I'm going to do the same with the smaller poppy. The next part then that I'm going to die cut, I'm going to start working on the leaves. So I'm just going to get rid of all of these pieces. So first of all I'm going to bring in one of the pieces of jade cardstock, again that has the adhesive on the back. I'm going to cut the smaller of the 2 leaf spray dies. This is the detail that goes on top. Just pop this onto here. Rebuild our sandwich. And actually what I will do, since I've got plenty of room on my plate here, I'm going to push this over to one side. And then taking another piece of Just Jade cardstock, which I'm just going to cut down slightly. I'm going to start using this to do some of the other pieces. So this is the background piece that goes with this detailed piece. I'm going to use the background piece of the spray. And then I also have all of these pieces here that are for the flower buds, and these are sort of the green part that go around those. So I'm just going to arrange those on here as well. And I will also bring in the other piece of Just Jade cardstock that I have the adhesive on the back of, and I'm going to do the detailed inner part so it all goes through in one go. It helps to speed up your die cutting. Okay, that's those pieces done. So there you can see there's the white backing paper on the die, so I'm just going to pop this one out again using the pokey tool. Just lightly push into these release holes on the die and the cardstock will come out for you. And I'll pop that to one side. Same with this one. So there's the die cut in there. I'm just going to poke this through. I'm actually going to cut this one a second time, so I'm just going to pop it back on there. And then all of these, no adhesive on these are just plain, so I'm just going to poke all of these out using my pokey tool. So when I run this one back through again, I'm going to run the base part back through a second time as well, so I have 2 of those. Okay, there's just 2 more die cuts now that I need to make, and then we'll be finished with all of the die cutting. So what I'm going to be needing for this is a piece of Misty Moonlight cardstock. And for this I'm just going to cut the flower centres. So I have both the larger piece and the smaller one. I'm just going to pop them both down and run those through the Big Shot. Okay, that should be all of the die cutting that we need for this card. So I shall pop the Big Shot out of the way. And I'll bring in all of the die cut pieces that we've just made. So we have here the 2 large background pieces for the flowers and the layer pieces that go over the top of them, like so. We have 3 leaf buds, which are these small pieces here, and then 3 of the flower buds that go into those. We have 2 of the single leaves individually, so the top piece and the base piece. There we go. I have the 2 flower centres that are going to go into our poppies. And we have 1 of these larger leaves, and again this one has the adhesive on the back ready to glue them together. So I'm going to get all of these pieces stuck together before we move on any further. So I'm going to start with the poppies first of all. So with this I've got the background piece and the front piece. I'm just going to peel this backing paper off here just to reveal the adhesive that is underneath. And this is incredibly sticky, so do be careful. Just hold it very gently to one side. You don't want to end up with sticky fingers. I'm going to line this up with my backing piece, and starting from one side I'm going to then lay it down. So get this nicely lined up with this edge, hold it in place, and then gently smooth it across the rest of the surface, and that adhesive clings out nicely. It's much easier than using wet glue to do this. You don't end up with glue coming out of any of the edges, and your piece goes together nice and easily. So I'm going to repeat that now on this smaller poppy. So here's the base and the detailed piece that goes over the top. Take the backing paper off. Line it up with the base piece and just hold it in place, and then smooth it across the rest of that piece. And there's that second one done. I'll move on to do the leaves then, and this is going to be exactly the same thing. So I'll peel off the backing and stick them down. So that's all the pieces that are using the adhesive sheets. For all of the other pieces I'm actually going to use Tombow liquid glue for this. Nice and easy to stick these all together then. So we'll start off by adding the centres to the poppies. I'm just going to put a tiny bit of glue on the back of here. You really don't need a lot. Like I said earlier, if you put too much glue on this, it is going to squeeze out of the edges and leave you with a bit of a sticky mess. I'll just drop that into place in the centre of that poppy. And then the same with the smaller one. Just a little bit of glue on the back of here. And pop that into place on the centre of that flower as well. And I'm going to use the liquid glue again to assemble these buds. And these are incredibly easy to do. So if I just pop these all over onto their backs, just going to add a little bit of glue right around the edge where the bud is going to sit. Take one of the buds and turn it over and just drop it into place like so. And there's one. And then do the same for the other two as well. And there are our 3 flower buds done. Okay, the next part then that I'm going to work on is getting the sentiment completed for the front of the card. So if I just pop these all over to one side, ready for building the card in just a moment. I shall bring in these 2 strips that I cut out earlier. So I've got 2 strips, like I said, 2.5 centimeters each wide, one in Magenta Madness, one in white. I'm going to bring in a punch that if you've watched any of my recent videos, you'll probably be quite familiar with by now. This is the lovely label Pick a Punch. And I'm going to be using the scalloped edge side this time. Now what I'm going to do first of all is punch the first side of our Magenta Madness piece. So I'm just going to feed this in, pop it all the way through to the end. Again, flipping the punch over so I can check the back, make sure everything is nicely lined up and centered across the punch edge. And I'm just going to punch that one. I'm going to keep my waist as always for measuring later. I'm going to do the same with the Whisper White piece, so feed that in, turn it over, make sure everything is lined up where I want it to be, and punch. And I'm going to keep the waist part again. And for the sentiment, I'm going to bring back in the Peaceful Moments stamp set here. And like I said, this is my mum's birthday card, so the only sentiment on here that's really going to work is Happy Birthday. So I shall grab that from here, there it is. And then I'm just going to grab a clear block. And this is a clear block B for this one. Just pop that over the stamp to pick it up. This is one of our cling mount stamp sets. As you can see, it clings to the block really nicely. I'm going to be using the white piece to stamp onto. And I'm going to do the stamping again in 2 colours. So I'm using Misty Moonlight and Magenta Madness, and I'm going to use the Stampin' Right marker technique again for this. So first of all, I shall take the Misty Moonlight marker. I'm using the brush tip on this, and just using the side of the marker, I'm going to colour in the word happy on the stamp with this ink, just making sure that all of the edges of those words get nicely inked up, but we're not colouring in any of the stamp where it says birthday. Just like so. And I'm going to do the same thing again with Magenta Madness, this time colouring in the word birthday. Just making sure that all of that stamp gets nicely inked up. There are no parts that get missed, especially on these sort of loops at the top of the letters and around that B. That looks good. I'm going to line the stamp up quite close to the edge where I've punched this today. Pop that down. And then you can see the sentiment is stamped nicely in both colours. And then bringing in the waist piece, exactly as I've done in some of my previous videos. I'm going to use this to decide where I want to trim my piece ready to punch it again. So I want to make sure that I have a nice even spacing on both sides of the sentiment. So I think that looks about right. So grabbing my paper snips, these are the good ones, not the gluey ones. I'm just going to cut right up this edge. Bring my punch back in and feed this piece all the way in. Making sure it's nicely centered across that punch edge. And then punch that. And there is the sentiment piece nicely cut. Now with the magenta piece, this is going to go behind. Now they are the same width, so you're not going to see any of the background piece behind it, but I wanted to have a bit on the edge, just a bit of extra colour, like so. And again, I'm going to use the waist piece to help me line this up and decide roughly where I want to cut this. So I'm going to try and eyeball this so I have an even spread on either side of the sentiment piece. And I think that looks about right there. So again, taking my snips, just going to snip up this free edge. And I'll punch this again in the punch. And then those two pieces will layer together nicely on our finished card, so you'll just get a strip of the colour around the side. Okay, I'll clear the deck slightly just to move some things out of the way so I can continue with our project. And the next thing that I'm going to do then, as I'm sure you might have heard me say before, no naked envelopes in my craft room. So I have one Whisper White envelope here. I'm just going to actually stamp Happy Birthday again just on the corner of the envelope, just to give it a little bit of detail so that when it arrives it doesn't look quite so plain. So exactly the same as before, just using the edge of the marker, the brush end of the marker, to colour in my stamp. And the same again with the Misty Moonlight for the word happy. I'm just going to stamp this once down in the bottom left corner down here. Just like so. Okay. So the next thing to do then is to bring all of the pieces back in and start assembling our card. So I have our card base here, and I'm going to burnish the score line using a bone folder. And doing this just helps to make the score line nice and crisp. It helps to keep your card together so it doesn't try and unfold itself, so that it stands up nicely once it is in place. And we shall then add on our piece of designer series paper that we cut. And for this I'm going to be using the liquid glue. When it comes to assembling card layers, I love using this glue. Once you actually put the two pieces together, the glue takes a few seconds to sort of bond with the layers, so it allows you just to wiggle it around, make sure that it is lined up perfectly before it all goes into place. And I've just put a very thin line of glue all the way around the edge and across the middle. You want to make sure that when you're using liquid glue that you do use just a very thin bead of glue around the edge. You don't want to add too much, or you'll find as you press it into place it all sort of squirts out of the edges and makes a huge sticky mess. Okay, that's our DSP on there, and then I'm going to add our Misty Moonlight matte in exactly the same way, so just another thin bead of glue right the way around the edge, and then some across the centre. And then layer this up as well. So you can see these two layers are slightly different. So the first one is just 1/2 centimetre smaller than the card base, and then this one is a full centimetre smaller than the DSP. So you get a slightly different effect with the layers on the outside of there. While I have the glue in hand, then I'm also going to add the matte onto the inside of the card. And I'm going to do exactly the same again, so just pop a thin bead of glue right the way around the edge, and then a little bit across the middle, and then add that to the centre of the card. Like I say, if you need to move it around a little bit. You do have a few seconds before it bonds in order to do that. Okay, and then we can start adding all of our pieces, our die cuts and the sentiment to the front of the card. So the way that we're going to lay this out, I'm going to want this leaf spray to come across the bottom edge of the card like so. I'm going to have one leaf coming down in this direction, and then the second one I'm going to have coming up this way a little bit more. The larger of the two poppies I'm going to pop right over to this side of the card, and the smaller one is going to sit in front of it just like so. Our sentiment piece is going to sit just in the bottom corner here, and then I'm going to tuck the buds in and around once we've got everything else in place. So I'm going to start with the very bottom layer, so that's all of the leaf pieces. Leaving them roughly where I had them during that sort of mock layout. Again, I'm going to be using liquid glue just to glue these in. And just a very small amount just on the back of them. Get it to the edge as much as you can. Again, you don't need a huge amount of glue for this. Pop it into place, and you can move it around if you need to for a few seconds before it bonds. And I'll do the same for these two leaves as well. Okay, now those are in place, I'm going to start layering on our flowers over the top. So taking first of all the large poppy, I'm actually going to stack this one up with dimensionals. Not too many on the back of here, just a couple, just to make sure that it bonds nicely with the base layer. Just take the backs off those. And like I said, I want this quite far over to this side. I think just about there should do it. And then this poppy I'm going to pop at an angle just over the top. So the way that I'm going to do this so that it doesn't end up being too deep is just put dimensionals on this side so that this edge doesn't have extra height again on top of that poppy. So as I flip this over, and I want to put dimensionals over on this side only. And to help anchor it, I'm going to put a tiny bit of liquid glue just on this side here. So as we stick it down, it will stay in place. Okay, so the two dimensionals are on this side and the liquid glue is on this edge. So that liquid glue is going to hold the poppy onto there, and then the dimensionals are just going to stick that firmly to our card base. And now I'm going to pop in our buds just around the edges of the card. These you can just pop them in and around, sort of play around with it, see where you think they look best. I think I'm happy with those like that. So again, I'm just going to pop these in with liquid glue. There we go, that's the buds in. So the next part I'm going to do is to pop together our sentiment. Now this is already one dimensional layer thick. I don't want this to be too thick. I do have to post this and I want it to get through the post nice and easily. So I'm going to layer these two pieces together using liquid glue. So these two together are nice and flat. So I'm just going to pop again a small amount of glue onto the back of here. line it up on my backing piece. Again, using the fact that I can wiggle this around to make sure it's nicely lined up and I've got a nice even spread of the colour on either side. I'm going to do a very similar thing to how I did this poppy. I'm going to use dimensionals just at the bottom edge of this and then a little bit of liquid glue across the top just to make sure that it bonds to those two to keep it in place. So as I said, a couple of dimensionals across the bottom. I'll peel those two backs off. And then a little bit of liquid glue just across the top, just to hold it in place. Line it up where I want it to go. And then make sure it's nicely stuck down. And just to finish this off, I'm actually going to use some of the enamel dots. Again, these are in the 2020-2022 in colours. So all 5 colours are in here. And all I'm going to do is use a couple of the colours. So we've used 3 colours on here. Obviously we've got the Magenta Madness, the Misty Moonlight and the Just Jade. I'm going to use dots from those 3 colours just around the card to finish it off. So first of all, I'm going to add one in Misty Moonlight just down here. And then a second one in Misty Moonlight just to the side of that. And I'm just using my poking tool again to pick these up. The other reason I like doing this, other than the fact that I don't have to use my nails to get underneath them, is I can use the end of the poking tool with the enamel dot on it just to kind of move this around and see where I want this to go. And I think I'm going to pop this one just on the edge of here. And then I'm going to add a couple in the Magenta Madness. And I'm going to pop these further up the card over here. So I'm going to have one just there. I'm going to pull another one in down here, and then just to tie those 3 colours in, I'm going to put in one in Just Jade. Just to finish off my triangle, I'm going to pop that one just in here. And there is our finished birthday card. I really hope you have enjoyed this project. Thank you again for joining me in my craft room today. As always, all of the products used in this project, along with any of the tools that I've used, are going to be listed in the description box below. If you are in the UK and you don't currently have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator and you would like a copy of our current catalogues, please do get in touch. There is a link below for you to sign up on my website and I'll get a copy of those catalogues out to you. This week the new Autumn Winter catalogue is actually going live, so if you do sign up you will get a copy of that as well. If you have any questions or comments about this project, please do pop them in the comments box. I'd be happy to answer your questions and help you out, and I always love to hear what you think of the projects that I've put together. If you make this, I would love to see your creations as well. Tag them on Instagram or on Facebook with the hashtag Inky Memories, and I'll keep an eye out and pop a comment on there for you as well. I hope to see you again in my craft room. Thank you again for watching. Bye bye for now.